It's my part now to briefly introduce you to the third chapter of our conference, which we subtitled Archaeology of the Future, Prospective Scenarios of the Past. With the next two presentations, our intention really is to reframe the work of Kiesler, and in particular the notion of Correalism from a contemporary point of view, through the lens of two category-defining spatial practitioners. We're going to start with Barbara Imhof, whom I'm going to introduce briefly. Barbara's main areas of work lie in space architecture and design research, in the fields of integrating biological systems into architecture and the design of advanced systems for resource-constrained environments. She's the co-founder and co-managing director of LIQUIFER in Vienna and Bremen. And for more than 20 years now, Barbara Imhof has taught at various renowned universities, including ETH in Zurich, the International Space University in Strasbourg, the University of Kassel, Berlin-Weißensee School of Art, and our very own University of Applied Arts in Vienna here. She's in huge demand of late. Just 2 days ago, she presented her latest publication, co-edited publication, titled Correality of Humans, Machines and Microbes. This is the piece, which is going to be available online as a free resource on the website of Birkhuis, as I just have been told. So feel free to download this copy. And please welcome to the stage Barbara Imhof.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction and the invitation. When I heard about that, I got very curious, and because I'm an architect, of course, I'm intrigued. I have been intrigued, and I still am with Kiesler, especially with the endless house, endless space, and because that's also part of my daily work, to provide living environments in the endless space, in a different kind of space as probably Kiesler meant it. Homo spatius, homo spacius, don't even know how to pronounce it, is a combination of two words, which are probably, you know, if an ancient Roman, if you would have met an ancient Roman in the streets of Rome, then and would have talked about astronauts, then probably that's what he would have told you, homo spatius. It's actually, I didn't choose the title. It was a ping pong between, I think, Wolfgang and myself. We were part of an exhibition in Saint-Étienne in France about space and design and the relationship between outer space and design. And that was titled Homo Spacius, and I think I put it out on Facebook as an announcement, and then sort of it came back to me as a lecture title for today. So what I try to do is actually to take examples of our LIQUIFER work and try to collect it with Kiesler's Correalism theory or philosophy, and yes, and so we'll see if it's sort of a giant leap or a small step. Homo spacius. So living in space. This is Ed White. It's the first American to go on a spacewalk, and he's floating in this endless space above sort of a couple of 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface. What is interesting about this environment that it is a microgravity environment, so it's really sort of without gravity. It is where suddenly sort of the walls and the floors, everything becomes one. And the orientation also is more or less where the feet are is down. And so I'd like to show you a little bit. This is the International Space Station. It's very close. It's closer than Munich. And it's probably, if you take a rocket directly, then it's also probably you can reach it in a similar time as Munich. And it's just sort of, we have to think a little bit, and that probably correlates with how Kiesler perceived space. We really have to think not only about sort of here and then the outside and then the further away, but also, consider that kind of, dimension and extend it to infinity. The next video is something where you see how people, so when designing for this environment, how people move in that space and how very much different it is. So this is Sunita Williams. She was the commander of the ISS a couple of years back. But you see that the way she moves is very different, that there are no, it's like that part of space station looks very much like a machine, and she also sort of has no real furniture, as you can see. So there's nothing, you're in a constant state of motion. That's in contrast to how we are here now. And you're basically trying always to stand still through fixing yourself. One of those who are diving, you know that it's very hard to sort of, when you see this kind of particular fish or, cave, it's to sort of really stand still in front of it. So this is, here we always have to make an effort to start moving, but in zero gravity we have to make an effort to stand still. And this kind of position is called this neutral body position. And it's on the left-hand side, you see a drawing by NASA, which is one of sort of the iconic drawings, and it's sort of the starting point for designing. You start from designing sort of from the human body outwards. And so when I looked a little bit further into Kiesler, I'm not an expert, so my perspective is quite a top view perspective. I found this drawing and it immediately reminded me of this NASA drawing, because he was also concerned of, okay, what can I reach? Where do I look? What's my cone of visibility? And what is sort of my range of movement? So on the right-hand side, that's in gravity, and on the left-hand side, that's in microgravity. Another aspect I came across and which I found interesting was sort of at that time, when he started sort of thinking about it, writing about it, to get away from form follows function, or from that pure beauty concept, which is, as when you start really working with space engineers and for the European Space Agency, or other agencies or companies in that area, then I stopped talking about beauty or aesthetics or anything, because it's not understood as we understand it. But if you start talking about structure, function and form, then you can start suddenly, in this kind of talking to another discipline, in this sort of transdisciplinary relation, you can start creating a conversation, and there's a language, sort of a common language, which is understood. And it's also, when you start designing, then, and this is movie or an animation of a competition where the European Space Agency asked us to design together with them for NASA for the Centennial Challenge a couple of years back for a Mars habitat. But here you also see that actually it's a habitat, it's a base coming from local resources. And the structure of that local resources really informs the building, and also the sort of construction methodology, which is lava casting, so really heating up the local sand and creating molds. And then sort of we have to have some functions, like the main living area, the habitat, or the laboratory, or the greenhouse, to create this self-sufficient closed-loop system, which is autonomous, completely autonomous in its resources, and provides a biosphere for humans on this very far away planet. And the way the whole structure is done is this kind of half dome structure. So it also is something which has a quite organic form, and or that emerges from that. And here you see crew quarters, so private spaces and common spaces, And then you see also a lot of separations, which are basically there for security. If some part has a failure, then you can save yourself in the other part. And when you design for these sort of very extreme environments, then it is really about looking at habitability. So about habits. What are the traits? How do we behave? If it's an international crew, then everybody behaves differently. There's a great cultural difference. And so how do we come together, and how does these spaces we design reflect these different characters, cultures, and social structure? And often, and I would class it, that's why I put social heredity, because it's really about, how to when Kiesler wrote about it, the way I interpret it is about the transferring, I think, the habits and the culture to the next generation. And when we stay with Mars and we think in a couple of generations, then probably that will also play a role. So that is also a connection point to the Correalism philosophy. Preparing for sort of such a space mission can be reenacted. I put this deliberately in here because it was a project Lucy and I 2 years ago were engaged with Avis Ruder and Daniel Aschwanken and Kerstin Bernier. So it was sort of art performance part, but it was about training, how to train, how to prepare for space missions. Of course, this was in an artistic concept. Coming together. So no space project can be done on, no one partner, one discipline on its own. So it's really about the interdisciplinarity. It's sort of pre-programmed in any kind of space missions. And the example I take here is interesting because it's a greenhouse in Antarctica. Antarctica being sort of the most extreme place on Earth. So the closest you can come to space on Earth is Antarctica. And this was a 14-partner project, an EU project, a couple of years long. The greenhouse is still in Antarctica. That's the most recent picture. And so you saw with the Mars base that one part of it is the greenhouse. So we really need to find a solution for making bases on celestial bodies independent by integrating a greenhouse. So this is the preparation for that, the training. And that was a project, 14 partners all around the world, architects, botanists, space engineers. I think these were and then of course different kinds of engineers, light engineers, nutrition specialists for the plants. So all kinds of different people came together here. It was a simple structure transported by the Alfred Wegener Institute, Polar Research Institute, 2 containers. So one is this is where you enter, the sort of airlock, because you have minus 40 degrees outside here, plus 20 in here. And then you have sort of the workspace and the machinery, and then the actual growth, the plant part, the greenhouse. And interestingly enough, they had problems getting rid of the heat because it became so warm inside. This is the first section, the service section. So we were participating in the service section, but also our space engineers within the team were sort of seeing that the interfaces of all the machinery would fit, and that the requirements, the boundary conditions were also configured so that the greenhouse then finally could be built. So we built this part and also designed it. You see my 2 partners, Waltraud Hoheneder and René Václavicek, also in a sort of mock-up situation. And then this is how the greenhouse looked like. So this is a space engineer, and then in a couple of minutes a polar researcher appears, but basically this whole setup of different kinds of vegetables was curated by plant specialists, by nutrition specialists, and by light specialists. So there was Swiss chard, there was pepper, there was strawberry, all different kinds of lettuce and other spices. And you see the growth area is approximately 10 square meters, that's like a cabinet size. And we could harvest within 9 months up to nearly 300 kilograms of vegetables without the biomass was gathered here. So that's quite a lot. So that's an interesting system also for indoor farming. It was an aeroponic system, and here under the cover of these, there were the roots of the plants. So there was not much water and no soil. So it was a very resource efficient system. This is sort of then, how would that look? Because it was actually meant to be a space application. So how does this look in space? This is comprising of 2 parts, of a solid part with all the systems and then an inflatable part with all the greenhouse and the plant trays. And here you see quite well all the different parts of the quite complex system. The light, sort of here, the LED growth lights above the plant trays, and the air management system. So it's basically a small biosphere in itself, a technologized biosphere. The thermal system, and then you will also see the nutrition system. And of course you need the power and control. Water tanks, yes, for the plants. And then this would be inside when finished and built. And that would be either for Moon or for Mars and would be covered again with regolith. And that really leads into that concept of regeneration. So Kiesler said that architecture is the sort of should be regeneration for humans, but it could be also regeneration for plants or for animals, or regeneration as a sort of taking care of resources. So it's our energy household, our resources, but then translated, it could be also the resources of a whole biosphere. And thinking that sort of greenhouse application further and coming back to Earth, I'd like to just briefly mention one other project. It's called Living Architecture, and it was also a multi-partner project, EU project, and that is really about producing electricity, reclaiming resources from the grey water, and also polishing the grey water. And it's a bioreactor, a 3-in-1 bioreactor, where we built the membranes between these different parts and developed them. This is a sort of experimental setup because it also uses synthetic biology. At the moment, you can't leave the lab. However, in a more generic architecture, so it's not about the architecture, but it's about the system of sort of regenerating resources, we tried to integrate these living architecture bioreactors into a multi-story building that has different incorporates different functions, offices, restaurants, shops, but also a lot of flats, and then houses these bioreactors. So what is happening here? That from the toilet and the tub and the washing machine, the water sort of goes into the lower floor, and through these green bioreactors, gets polished there, and then gets sort of in the next floor again reused in the toilet flushes or as dishwasher water and so on. And it's what you see here in the background. That's also there are different greenhouses incorporated there. One sort of technical greenhouse, because also the biomass from that greenhouse then can be fed into the bioreactors. I found a quote by Kiesler in the book Endless Kiesler, which was edited by Florian Medikus and Klaus Bollinger, which is really sort of exactly what living architecture that project wanted to do, and what also is sort of the premise, I would say, of the book. You were mentioning before corporeality. The house must become a cosmos in itself, a transformer of life forces which develop naturally in this man-made environment to incredible dimensions and seclusion. And the house must no longer vegetate with leprosy and warts on the earth's surface, but must take its place in the world of creations like a crystal, a planet, a fruit, an eye, a muscle, an atom. It must become a creature, an aggregate of forces that add up to a new body. So it is really about the emancipation of the